I guess today we're going to talk about the ultimate tips to pitch your business ideas to investors successfully. I think before we start, I'll give the floor to the panelists, probably give 1-2 minute intro for each of you. Can we start with that first? Ben, maybe you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ben, managing partner at NEXEA, and we are a leading angel investment network in Malaysia, as well as we also run the leading corporate accelerator program for startups and scale-ups. So yeah, if you're a startup or scale-up and you want to if you're looking for investments, then do check us out. We've been investing for over 6 years with a portfolio of over 40 startups and over 40-50 angel investors that are high net worth individuals that also, they not only invest, but they also mentor startups with their wealth of experience and knowledge in their industries. That's all from me.
Okay. How about Kian? You want to go next?
Yeah. So for us, PARKIT is a platform where property owners can list their available car park spaces. And what we do in turn is we activate them and provide them to the public or people who needs them. So essentially, we try to increase the supply of car parks in our city, in our community, through individual owners. So that's what we do.
Okay, how about Ken?
Hi, my name's Ken. We actually did we started a startup called Kapas Living throughout the MCO because out of necessity, because our prime business was actually managing homes for Airbnb. So that business had a big downturn. So we kind of out of necessity started Kapas Living, which is a direct-to-consumer bedsheet brand.
And YC.
Hi everyone, my name is YC. I'm a partner at AC Ventures. AC Ventures is an early stage fund with about $300 million under management. We predominantly focus on early stage Series A, Series B companies, and our history starts off in Indonesia. But myself as a KL born and bred individual, we've recently come back and we've recently launched a fund in Malaysia, and definitely looking forward to seeing all the talented Malaysians out there today.
Okay, let's start off. I think everybody, Kian and Ken, you've been pitching, I would assume, before this for your startup. Probably to start off, how has the experience been? How many times have you probably start off with? How many times have you pitched since you have had your startup? Either one of you, maybe wanna start off first, Kian.
Okay. Yeah. I can't remember how many times I've pitched. I think I really don't remember. I remember starting to pitch when the idea of PARKIT is just an idea. I had nothing, I just graduated. I started pitch then to my friends first, family, colleagues, eventually accelerators, eventually NEXEA, and then all the way to MDEC and VCs. So many different experiences with the pitch so far. And I think as you grow a business, then the purpose of the pitch or the focus of the pitch also changes. And for me, I think it's quite important to recognize who you're pitching to and the point that you're trying to illustrate.
Yeah. How about for Ken?
Yeah.
How many times have I pitched? Well, we are quite selective in terms of the number of times that we actually pitch. We actually pitch a couple of times, to be honest, our main business, we only pitch to only 2 or 3 investors. We were very selective. We actually identified who exactly we wanted to talk to or who would be a great investor to our business before we actually went to talk and reach out to them. Because we were very, very focused in terms of creating a very sustainable business. So we didn't really have we didn't need to spray.
I think, I guess for the investors, for Ben as well as for YC, since you've started, right, you probably have seen so many pitch. I think there are many rounds of pitch usually, whether it's the first pitch, whether somebody you just bump into at events prior to MCO. Maybe Ben, on a typical month, how many do you see, whether it's the same now during MCO and those during the time prior to MCO?
Yeah, I feel it's about the same, you know, group along the growth of the startup, you know, scene. I don't see that there is a big difference in the number of pitches. We still get about 1,000, and it's slowly growing at the same time. We get about 1,000 pitch decks in our email. We choose a number of them to pitch, and it's steadily growing despite, you know, the pandemic. Yeah.
Do you actually meet every one of those that actually submitted, or do you select, or how's the process itself for you guys?
Yeah, not possible to meet everyone. So sorry about that, but it's really tough to meet everyone. So what we do is we have a team to help me to screen for high potential startups, and those that make it through, we normally, you know, interview on average about 50 to 100 in a year. So I personally you know, sit in those interviews and ask the startups questions related to their businesses, so that, you know, while we are unable to meet 90% of them, you know, what I do is I try to spend as much time as possible with those that we can meet, and to really understand and find the hidden gems, you know, the really strong startups that, you know, most people wouldn't expect to meet when they are, you know, going through interviewing startups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about for yourself, YC? How many do you guys, I mean, in a typical month, I would say, how many do you meet, or how many pitch deck do you receive in the span of a month?
So maybe I'll do I guess a pre-COVID, post part of COVID, right? So I think like so back in the day, I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 10 years ago, I remember having to do about at least 5 meetings a day. So these are actual meetings. And so if you think about it, maybe 100 meetings a month, maybe, I don't know, 80% of them are new, give or take. Although this was in London, I think like in Jakarta and KL, well, during COVID, I think that has been very different. I think typically, so at the latest stage, we don't do too many meetings in a given period. So maybe about like, we look at maybe about like, I don't know, 10 companies in a given month, for if you're looking at like Series B onwards. And of those, you only meet, well, typically you do a Zoom call for at least maybe half of that to a third, give or take, and then you proceed on the basis. I think currently we're looking at probably 2-3x of the number for the Series A, Series B stage. So it really depends on the stages and what part of the life cycle or the value chain you're at, I suppose. Yeah, but it's definitely been busy. I think like there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of like supply of that. The biggest question is really like, how do you you have limited time, how do you cut through the fluff and get straight to the beef?
Yes, so probably then my next question. So what do you actually look for? I think I mean, a lot of startups will ask the same thing, right? All of them will ask, even when we were doing investment, a lot of people ask, what are the things that you look for? Typically, it's quite difficult to pinpoint on 1 or 2 things. It's usually a combination of things. But again, different investors look at different things, right? There are sometimes certain investors look at business models. Some investors look at probably the returns immediately. So for you guys, for the investors, what are the things, what are the core things that you need to look for when you're listening to a pitch or looking at a pitch deck?
Ben, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So generally, when investors, when you're pitching to investors, especially, right? What you want to do is you want to show that your team is a strong team. I think that's always one of those. I think most panel discussions, the team comes out to be either number one or number two, usually number one, right? And I really believe so because at the end of the day, the team actually chooses which market they go to, how they adjust the product, how they refine it over time. They determine the business model and they determine everything else, right? So as long as you have a good team that can figure things out and iterate and make things work, that's usually going to stay on the top, right? The second factor usually is that you want to show that you are able to capture a certain market, right? And when you capture that market, or when you do capture that market, you are able to produce enough revenues, to justify a really, really big startup, right? Ideally, of course, everybody's sort of looking at a unicorn size sort of company. Not always, right? But generally, that's mostly what people are looking for. So those two are the usual factors. Other than that, I would say scalability is really, really important in the startup game, in the VC game as well, because if you have a great business but unfortunately if it's not scalable, VCs do think twice about that. Scalability is really what drives returns in venture capital. So it's also up there in some of those important factors that startups should consider to sort of highlight when pitching to investors as well.
Yeah. How about YC?
Sure.
Is it for you guys?
I think like ultimately it depends. First depends on like the stage of the company. So let's break it up to, let's say, earlier stage and slightly later stage. So I think like for an earlier stage company, I typically look at slightly different stuff compared to slightly later companies. So for slightly later companies, I'll start with a slightly earlier company. So I think like Ben said, I think team is the most important at that stage, because the reality is the company doesn't have anything to show. I mean, in reality, right? So I think like there's no IP, there's effectively no IP, there are no assets. All they have predominantly is an idea, a force of nature, and hopefully some revenues to prove that their point or product market fit. But let me double click a bit on team. So like when it comes to team, I typically have two trains of thought. Number one, it can be like from on a paper basis or on a surface level basis, team looks spectacular in terms of like experience and abilities and so on and so forth. Think about it like a resume of sorts, like which is also very important, because that becomes a signal or becomes a magnet for other talent or other capital. But I think the second part I typically look for, and this probably more applies to pre-seed companies, is that the founder or the founding team in this case has like an insatiable interest in making things happen. So and it could be an insensible methodology or manner of doing so. What I mean by that is like so everybody sells an idea, everybody sells a dream, but there are very few individuals who can be, I guess, crazy enough or silly enough to actually go out and actually make it happen. So I think as Kayan was saying earlier, he doesn't remember all the pitches that he's made, because I think the reality is that you never, there's just too many to recall, right?
Yeah.
And you need to be so stubborn and so I guess like unashamed to be able to go and pitch an idea that isn't like at that point as material as it could be, like 1-2 years down the road, to a whole bunch of strangers. And it takes that individual to actually make that happen, because the reality is the founder or the founding team in this case, let's say in this example, okay, he would have to go and pitch to a whole bunch of strangers to become his customers. Having that kind of, seeing that kind of individual, like that's an extremely important like proof point for the future. Because if the founding team or the founder is not able to do that, how can he or she be able to convince any given stranger to take a punt on their product? So at the very early stage, that's extremely important. I think for the later stage, it increasingly boils down to the metrics and the depth of the metrics. So what I mean by that is like, top line metrics, if you think about it, revenue, gross profits, margins, cost, how you manage cash flow, so on and so forth. 1 or 2 levels down would be like retention, your cohorts, how deep or how active and engaged your users are. Do they keep coming back? And to some extent, I would actually argue that I would prefer like significantly deep metrics to nice top line metrics. So it really comes back down to where the company is, how old they are, what stage they're at.
Yeah. Okay. Now want to ask Kian, like what are the things that you do prior to a pitch? Probably there are times when you're not prepared because sometimes you just meet somebody, right? Potentially. Or if you have time that you actually schedule a pitch. So in that 2 different scenarios, how do you prepare yourself? Or do you prepare yourself? Right?
Well, it depends. Depends, like you mentioned, there's 2 types of pitches. The first one is if you pitch to a impromptu, like you just meet somebody and you start a conversation and you end up pitching, then that's not a problem for me because it's a conversation and I know the business the best.
Yes.
And so it's very, very natural for me to just talk about the business and just talk about my vision, my idea, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve. That's very easy. That's not a problem. But when it comes to scheduled pitches, like, and okay, it's scheduled, it's with a VC or if it's with a corporate and there's a meeting room, there's all these. So there's pressure, and there's pressure you put on yourself and there's pressure I put on myself. And so you got to prepare a pitch deck. I remember I did a pitch once to Cradle, a pitch to MDEC as well. It's not in a normal, room. It's in a corporate boardroom, can fit 40 people, and situation becomes quite pressured. And so more than the pitch deck, I mean, that's a given. It's got to be good, right? How I prepare myself is more to a psychology kind of level. Like I sit down, I try to calm myself, try to understand what points I'm going to say. One very, very important part is trying to imagine what kind of questions the potential investors will be asking you and prepare the answers for them. So what I like to do personally is have a Q&A in the deck. So, and you don't pitch the Q&A. So the time when the investor asks you the question, you can just bring it up to the Q&A, to that page, and you usually look at the investor's face, and they're obviously sometimes a little bit surprised that, oh, well, you're prepared. Yeah, so I think that's a good hint.
Okay, how about Ken? Do you actually practice prior to that? I'm not.
We usually just run through the deck between me and my partner, right? Like we just go through what would make sense, because when we create the deck, it's all run through your head. So the one thing that you need to prepare the most for, I think, would be basically getting all your numbers right. It's very embarrassing if you don't know your top line numbers, or you don't know your profit numbers or your metrics, especially when the investor asks and you're like,
yes,
it's kind of a waste of everybody's time, basically. Yeah. And they do appreciate it, right? If you can write, and basically it shows that you know your business.
Yeah. Do you actually email them prior to the? I mean, if, for example, it's a scheduled one, right? Or the ones that, for example, you're going to an event and you're going to meet this, let's say, Sequoia, right? The ultimate investor. So and you're going to be at the same event or venue or whatnot. Have you actually emailed them prior, or that's not something
not so
like
thick-skinned now, but some people do, right? But I think if I was going to meet Ben or something like that, and then I would just email in advance. So at the end of the day, you get a more productive meeting at the end of the day, right? They can go through, they can see what kind of questions or what makes sense, and then it becomes a more productive meeting rather than wasting everybody's time.
Yes. So what do you think what was the factor that you think you closed a deal? These are for the startups, right? What do you think is the ultimate?
So
tip
mine, I
reason
think,
why we
was,
got the funding?
yeah, let me try to take a crack at this. So we were doing through a mentorship program with Alan, one of NEXEA, one of the NEXEA board, right? And we basically had to make sure our numbers was very good, right? We cash flow positive, two founders who were quite knowledgeable in the industry, and we were primed to take the lead in conquering that particular industry. We were starting to gain market share, and you can see all these metrics. So that kind of thing starts to look very interesting for an investor, right? You can see traction, you can see cash flow positive, you can see retention, like all these kind of things kind of sounds like a very, very good business. Like that would start to pique the interest of an investor. Right?
Yeah.
At least that's what I think Ben kind of like invested in as well.
How about yeah. Is there
Well, for me,
probably is there something that
so
differentiates yourself from the rest, right? There's other parking app in the market. So in that sense, how do you
so I think
differentiate yourself?
So I think when I first started pitching, I just like YC said, I had nothing. I don't think I even had revenue when I first pitched. However, I got accepted into an accelerator with through NEXEA and pitching. And when I asked why they chose this, I think there was two factors. The first factor was because we had some form of revenue. The first pitch I did to them, I had no revenue. I had just an idea, but I had some experience as a consultant at that time, and I had a degree, so I thought there would be enough. But actually, in hindsight, I don't think it was, because when I speak to Sam and Ben at the time, they told me that, well, I didn't think you were coming back. So because they just didn't think I had what it takes to actually go and get it done, you know. But like what YC said, I think having that ability to eventually go and do yourself, go on the ground, go and speak to people, actually go and close the sales, actually get your hands dirty. That's what got me my first investment, actually. And later on, when I started to pitch to Cradle to get grants, to MDEC to get a fund, that's mainly then down to the metrics, down to the business model, down to the expansion plan, the proposal, the projections, what are your plans, what are your budgets. So it's less about the team now, you know, but it's more towards the business model. Like, do you know what you're trying to do, and what is your plans? If I give you $2 million, like, what are you going to do with it? Do you know how to budget it? Do you know what you're going to spend on? So those are the questions that I think later stage investors, or rather, you know, Series A investors are looking for.
Yeah, for the investors, typically, I think, you know, within, I'm not too sure about the two of you, right, Ben and YC, but typically within the first few minutes, you know whether it's a company that you're interested to move on to the next round, right? Or look at them closely. Is that the same with the two of you?
Yes, broadly speaking, maybe a slightly bit more than a few minutes, but yeah, not too long after.
Okay, how about Ben?
I find that hard to answer because I sometimes find founders that are not the best at articulating, right, at presenting, or even at pitching. So at the end of the day, I would think that the best way is to really talk to them, understand understand their business, understand how they've been going about their business, right? And the numbers actually really help. So I think a lot of the times the proof is in the numbers. Anything that's closest to profit, right? If it's not profit, it's probably margins or revenues, or even if it's before revenues, it's the founders really willing to put their heart and soul into it and really push themselves and grow as a person. So I look for signs along all of those areas, and usually it turns out the way it's supposed to be. So like Kian said earlier, in the earlier days, the general preconception for working professionals going into entrepreneurship is that they usually hesitate to jump into entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
But Kian actually really jumped into entrepreneurship, and I think that's one of those key drivers that got him in, right? And for Ken here, it was a lot to do with the numbers, as well as their background, right? So the background sort of tells us they probably know what they're doing, and then the numbers back it up. So and Kian's numbers back his startup up today as well. So at the end of the day, I would say it's a bit of getting to know the founders at the same time, as well as their numbers, and the proof is in the numbers and in the business itself.
Yeah.
So I tend not to think I tend not to think that you can really find winners in a few minutes. I think it really takes some exploring to really figure that out. Because I also have another startup called Zikova, and e-commerce in diamonds. Strangely, most investors would think, hey, e-commerce, let's skip that. But this particular e-commerce does not behave like an e-commerce because they have zero inventories, right? So it took a while to find that out in the first place. So hidden gems like that, really hard to find. And it's only by really getting to know them that you can really identify these startups to be worth investing in, I would say.
Yeah. Also, I think at the end of the day, right, based on my experience, I think throughout the years, they are obviously, we are only human. Obviously, there are certain pitches where after the first 1 minute, exactly it's not something you're interested to, because sometimes it's not so much about the person, but sometimes it's whether it's within the stage that you're in, or whether it's within the industry that you're interested to invest, right? Obviously, sometimes the startups, they don't do their research, or they just pitch because you just provide money. They think that you can fund everything and everything.
For them, it's always their first time, looking for money, right?
Yes.
So they wouldn't know actually.
But in that sense, during pitches, right? Again, like you guys have heard, and of course the founders also have been pitching so many times. Do you like a pitch which is straight to the point, or do you value founders who are selling a dream, who actually are a bit more storytelling? Because even among my colleagues, some like just ask the founders, okay, go straight to the metrics. Like even the metrics, like, okay, what are the vanity metrics? What are the important metrics? I think YC, you mentioned this earlier, right? What are the different types of metrics? So for you guys, the investors, do you mind a bit of storytelling, or because you've heard so many, you prefer somebody to just cut the chase, go straight to what they're doing, and list down what all the metrics, how you're gonna exit, and all those? Yeah. Is that a preference? Any preference for you guys?
So maybe I'll give it a stab. So this is I think ultimately it comes down to personal preference, or I guess team's preference. For me personally, like I try to keep my meetings to a max of about 30, 40 plus minutes. So I cut straight to the metrics as quickly as possible. And I cover this as much as possible in the first 10 to 15 minutes. And the reason is because like at a certain point, all dreams are the same. And all stories are the same. So metrics help you to, I guess, create a first layer of filter. But I think the more important part for me is what happens after that. So right after you get in touch with the top line metrics and you ensure that, okay, at the very surface, this founder happens to have a decent sense of handling the business. I think we get down to the meat of it, which is really like, I think what most people forget is that in a startup or in any business, to be honest, or life, things hardly ever work out. So I actually want to push the dream selling aside and focus on the tough parts, on the mistakes. When quote unquote crap hits the fan, how are you able to deal with it? How are you able to make the best of it and just adapt to the situation? So I like to at that point, after sifting off first layer of metrics, is then a question of like, okay, when did you actually screw up, and how do you handle this? Because no one ever never screws up.
Okay.
Yeah. So you would definitely have a screw up, right? So it's just a question of like, how do you handle it? Because every day you got to put out 100 fires, and you only can put out 3. So what do you do?
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, that's where I think I like to spend my time.
Okay. How about Ben?
Sorry, could you repeat it again?
Yeah. So are you the type of investor that likes it when a startup founder comes to you and cut the chase, tell you all the metrics, or do you want to know the dream, right?
Yeah, when startups pitch, what I like to do is I like to let them be themselves in that meeting, right? So that I can also observe how they are naturally, right? And what they focus on. And that allows me to understand if they're founders that, like you said, focus a lot on the story, or if it's a founder that focuses a lot on the metrics, right? And for every type of founder, I tend to sort of treat them differently. So for those that focus a lot more on the story, if you're going to hit on the numbers a lot more, like you ask more questions on the numbers, then and if they're able to back it up, then they prove to be pretty strong at the same time, right? And if there's a founder that focuses on the metrics instead, I try not. I don't tend to check on their story on the other hand, but I try to dive into why there's so much focus on metrics, right? And is it working for them, right? Is it something where it's successful for them to focus on the metrics and how the business is doing there? And actually, it's not always about the main founder itself at the same time, right? Because it's always a team in the end, a team that complements each other. So, for example, I know Kian here, his co-founder, is pretty much a numbers guy, detail oriented, and is also tends to be a bit more of a people person, right? So that really helps in complementing Kian as a person, because not everybody has a very balanced personality, and most people are not actually. So having a team to complement, and when a team comes together like this, it forms a stronger company where it can handle different challenges in different situations. Whereas if, for example, if you only have a team that is highly productive and highly entrepreneurial, usually they will fail in the areas of process and people, right? So it's a lot of balance like that that we look for. So in terms of story versus metrics, I would say it's a bit of a balance. We've seen founders that can tell amazing stories and they've got really far with fundraising, right? So that happens to be a strength that has its own merit as well. I'm not going to discount storytelling, but metrics at the end of the day is where the proof in the pudding is. So businesses at the end of the day have to produce profit. They have to produce those margins, revenues, and above that is all the key metrics that every business has on its own, right? So I think both are really important actually at the end of the day.
Yeah. Now we go to the Kian and Ken. I want to ask you, what is something, I mean, based on your experience, right? Obviously, a lot of this you can Google. You can Google what are the things you need to put in your pitch deck. What are the things you need to do, the do's and the don'ts, right? Based on your experience, is there anything that nobody ever touched on that you think is important? That like nobody writes about it, nobody says it, nobody, in that sense, is there anything?
Can you want to go first, or?
We'll let you handle this one first, okay?
Yeah, I think Google helps a lot. Like, I don't know where I'll be without Google now. Google helps you do, I think, more than 50% of the work. But the answer to your question, where what they don't really tell you is that what's most important when you, for me, what I feel works for me. I mean, it could be different for someone else, but for me, I think what works for me is that when I speak to somebody, no matter who they are, whether they're an investor, a customer, or any kind of stakeholder, you got to be who you are as a person, because I mean, you just got to be yourself, right? And at the end of the day, if you're going to invest in a company, the metrics matter, yes, but a lot of it comes down to the team and also the decision maker. So that's me. And so it's very important that I can be myself. Just be yourself. If you are a tough, straight to the point person, controversial person, then just be like that. If you are a nice guy, then just be like that in your pitch, because ultimately when the investor invests in you, then it's a relationship, and you don't want them to later on find out, 6 months later, 1 year later, that, oh, actually this guy isn't who I thought he was. So I think what they don't teach you in Google is that when you do a pitch or when you speak to an investor or whoever it is very important, like to be yourself. Yeah, just be natural, just be yourself, and you'll be okay. And if they don't like you, then it's okay lah. We move on. Yeah.
People always say it's a marriage, right? Whether the relationship, whether it fits the relationship between the investor and the founding team. Yeah. How about you, Ken?
I think for me, I kind of changed the way I look at things, right? Like I think our focus now is not so much on pleasing investors, it's more so much on doing what's right for the business, which for us is just very, very laser product focused, right? So like, for example, with Kapas, right? When we designed our bed sheets, we made sure we created like the best bed sheets in the market, right? So we have got 95% 5-star reviews. And for us, that's the only metric that really matters. And we go out and we tell people about our business and they're like, hey, shit, your reviews are fantastic. And then we're like, yeah, that's something we can all fall back on. If you don't like our business, fine. But, heck, a lot of other people too. So for us, at the end of the day, if that's the core focus of your business and you've got a great product, I think you've got something winner there.
Okay.
Juliana, just to interject right here, we are currently, let's see, we have about 10 minutes left on this panel. So if you'd like to jump to the Q&A soon, that would be great. We have a lot of questions that just came in from our attendees. So if you go through that, maybe get some of our panelists to answer them, that would be wonderful.
Okay, hang on. Let's look at some of the questions. I think somebody's asking Ben and YC. May I know what is the amount, range of investment or size? Probably that one is more on what stage or ticket size, right? For you guys.
Yeah. So at NEXEA, we handle a range of different startups. So we actually do from idea stage all the way to A, right? So in that case, for idea stage startups, the accelerator fits the best. So if you're interested, you can head to corporateaccelerator.org. We do take startups from idea stage all the way to pre-A as well in the accelerator itself. And generally for startups beyond accelerator, we have additional angel funding, and we've done deals up to 7.8 million. Was the latest one that was closed, I think a month or two ago. That one was for La Pasa. So yeah, that's sort of the funding amount and the range that we do at NEXEA.
For us at AC Ventures is typically 1 to 5 million USD.
Okay. That's one question here. Somebody is asking, Nurfaiza, how can we define a strong team? I think because we keep on talking about it's important to have a strong team, right? For the companies that were startup. So how do you define a strong team? How do you guys define it? Is this measurable?
I think, yeah, definitely it's measurable. It's a strong team is hard to define because there's so many factors that go into it. So first of all, they have to complement each other in terms of strengths and weaknesses, right? Second, do they fit in one single culture, right? Are they working well together? Are they communicating a lot, right? If they can't and there's breakdowns and that will cause fights usually, then it's not going to work long term. It's similar to a marriage as well, right? So strong teams work very well together. They can gel. They actually go through thin and thick together, especially during tough times. When everything is going wrong, are they going to stay? Are they going to go through with you? All those tough times, right? Loyalty is another one of those things that is a big topic in a strong team. You can hire the best professionals and put them in your top management, right? But are they the types that hop jobs every year or so, right? Are they loyal? Are they going to stick with you and learn the ropes of the business for years and become real experts in that? Or are they going to leave every year, right? So there's a lot of things that actually go into building a very strong team.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's a bit hard to say. But I think those are some of the general factors that go into a strong team. But for smaller startups, in fact, usually we've seen strong teams in the form of teams where it's siblings, right? For some strange reason, we have funded a number of sibling teams, and they've played very well. Like Ken here, Ken and his sister are doing a great team, right? I think partly because you can't say I'm not going to be your sibling anymore. So you just have to stick to it together, right? Something to that effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've also funded teams where they have been longtime friends.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot as well. We've funded solo founders as well. So solo founders, they managed to find some loyal guys that has stuck with them for many years as well. So it's if it's solo, then it comes down to leadership a little bit. And yeah, so I think those are the main factors that goes into a team.
Okay. Probably I think we have a few more minutes. 4 more minutes. I think some of them, I think YC is answering the questions. I think one important one just now, I think Corey asked, what happens if the founder is not good at presenting or pitching, right? I think based on, again, experience, we see this a lot. So what is your advice? Or probably Ken and Kian, if that's you, I'm not too sure. But what happens if you're, as the founder, you think you're not confident enough, or when you first started? So do you ask somebody else? But the problem again is, if you ask somebody else, we've had session where we ask questions and they can't answer because obviously they're not a founder, right? They don't know some of the things like a founder knows. So what's your advice?
I think if you're not good at public speaking, it doesn't really matter, right? End of the day, if your business is great, right, and you know your business and you may stutter and stamper and do all sorts of things during your presentation, but end of the day, if your metrics are really, really good, as an investor, it is their job to sort of see that and not so much judge you on your presentation skills, but rather see the business for itself, right? I mean, that's how I feel. Like, that's why I say focus on the product, right? But don't bring in a founder just to be a good public speaker. That's a terrible reason to get a founder.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, but sometimes you always see those that actually somebody mentioned earlier, right? Somebody who knows how to present, they always have that extra advantage because everybody's listening to them, right? But to be able to sift through whether there's any substance, again, like you say, the metrics is right, whether it fits into your portfolio and all that. I think that's very important.
Perhaps I can double click on that very briefly, right? So I think at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer, or there's no example that is set in stone. So the typical advice that I normally give is like, if you're not sure, just get unignorable numbers. If you get unignorable numbers, no one can ignore you, regardless of whether you're a good public speaker or whether you can tell stuff or whatever, right? I think that's the simplest answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
To add to that as well, if you're not confident, then I think it's harder to raise. It's harder to raise funds. You're going into a discussion to raise funds where you're not confident in the business. And if you as a founder is not confident in the business, then why would an investor give you money? So that it just doesn't make sense. So you've got to be confident in the business. I mean, not confident in public speaking, but confidence in the business. If you're confident in the business, no matter if you are not good at public speaking, I think you'll still show, and you will show through your pitch deck. You'll show through your metrics. Yeah. So, and also I do think if you're going to get someone else to do the pitching for you to an investor, the first question the investor will ask is, why are you? why are you here? Why isn't the founder here? Of course, in the later stage, if you're really big and you want to get your CFO to go and do the pitches for you or get a meeting for you, then I think it's fine.
Yeah.
But maybe just a double click on that point, right? Like I think at the end of the day, and maybe also because we are coming to the close, I can also take this chance to be a bit controversial. Why do you have to raise funds? I think it's a very important question. Like, if you are a founder, why are you raising funds? Is it because you think you have no money to run a business? If you're unable to do so, do you think you should be even running the business in the first place? So I think these are existential questions to ask. But more importantly, I think venture funding is not really the only source of funding out there. And I think most founders need to be extremely cognizant of the fact that venture is just the most publicized source of funding out there. I think the reality, on the other hand, is that revenue is the cheapest form of funding you can get. So I think it all comes back down to, if you can build a good business, I think the capital will come, regardless of where the sources are. And I think like most questions, and a couple of questions I saw in the Q&A were like, okay, how do I get access to this kind of funding? I think the question I would pose back is really like, if you had no money, but needed to create $1 million of revenue, okay, maybe not overnight, but maybe over a couple of months. The big question you should ask yourself is like, how would you make it happen? Because to be honest, I think the best entrepreneurs will make it happen.
Yes. Okay. Any before we close, any red flags so far? If there's during in pitching and all that, one red flag or two red flags from each one of you, maybe.
Red flags.
Sorry. Yeah, red flags. I mean,
YYC, go for it.
No, maybe Kian and Ken should give red flags on investors. Let's start with that. I think more interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, well, one, if you're burning cash and your gross margins are terrible, then that's a huge red flag. You probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
That's just me. I like to build businesses. Yeah, I like to build businesses that make money. It's hard not to do that.
Yeah.
For me, red flags are. Red flag would be if you're not sure why you are doing what you're doing. I think as a certain stage for every founder, you have you have a situation where you will go through shit like the MCO. Right, and just like YC said or Ben said, like you will encounter problems, and when you encounter problems, like how do you deal with it? And it is a process for founders to actually analyze it, process it. But at some point, they will ask the question like, okay, how bad is this going to last? Can I last? And I think if you have that kind of thinking in your mindset, you shouldn't be raising funds at that point. You've got to maybe speak to your current investors, speak to your mentors, and ask them for some feedback in the business. How do you just tell them your problem? Maybe they can give you some advice, and then you try to turn it around. And once you're able to turn it around and things get better and you're confident again, then go for the pitch. Yeah. If you have any doubts, then don't go for a pitch.
Okay, YC or Ben?
I guess red flag on my end would be so earlier when I talked about diving deeper in the numbers and making things a bit uncomfortable for the founder. Red flags are when the founder isn't able to directly or rightfully address those questions. And it tells me, I mean, those are signs, not necessarily the truth, but those are signs that the founder doesn't really have a handle on the business. So they can practice all they want in front of the mirror for the storytelling aspect, but when it comes down to the details or the questions that are typically not asked, then they better have an answer for it, because if they don't, then it just tells me that they
don't know. Okay. How about Ben?
Yeah, I think red flags actually can appear anywhere along when you're evaluating the team or the market. Sometimes the market size isn't big enough, or if the business just cannot scale. Like this sort of business, some businesses just cannot scale, right? And like YC said earlier, VC is not the only kind of funding out there. So it probably fits other forms of funding. And then if you look at, let's say, the product itself, there are red flags there as well, like as simple as bad reviews or lack of product market fit and so on. So it can appear everywhere. So I think at the end of the day, just as founders, just be yourself, pitch the best you can. Take it as an experience at the end of the day, and keep on improving on that, right? And I always tell founders that, hey, this is probably not the last time you're going to pitch, right? And you can apply again anytime as soon as anything changes. So just keep on trying. No harm in that.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, that was my last point. I wanted every one of you to at least give a minute of advice, but I think Ben covered both the questions at the same time. So probably the rest, a minute to advise your fellow startups or to startups, right? To startup founders. What is a key advice that you want to share? One or
This
two
is easy,
or many?
right? So I think again, like this is the one thing I learned is that just make great product. Like don't make subpar, don't make mediocre product. Just make really, really good product, and your life is just so much easier. Yeah.
YC or Kian?
Let's go. Yeah, start with entrepreneurs.
Sorry?
Okay. Yeah. Well, for me, just be yourself. Just be yourself. Do your pitch. Don't worry so much about the details. Just go in, just be yourself, and have a normal conversation with a normal person sitting opposite you who is trying to invest his money. So just take it like that. Just speak to him. And again, if they don't think it's a good shot, then you cannot convince the person in that meeting. So what you can do is follow up after 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. Try to get why he's not so convinced right now, and then try to prove to him that well, I will prove to you that later on you will see that I'm worth investing in. So I think a lot of founders also they have their first pitch, and when it's turned down, they don't follow up, they don't send updates. But I think doing that is also quite important, because then the VC gets to know you better. They can see progress in the business. They start to think about it a little bit more and be like, hey, instead of me speaking to 100 startups a month, maybe I've got something here. So that's my advice.
YC, you want to say anything before we close the session?
I was gonna volunteer Ben, but like I guess since you put me on the spot, I guess maybe the first response or answer that came to my head when you asked the question was like as an ex-entrepreneur myself, I typically ask the person back, are you sure you want to do this? Because it's not an easy journey. And to a very large extent, like the odds are significantly stacked in your favor, which means you will fail, probably. But at the same time, it will, regardless of whether you quote unquote fail or succeed, I think like it will be, and I'm sure like Ken and Kian here can probably empathize, it will be one of the most rewarding experiences you ever have in life. I mean, that's what I feel, whether it's crap or not. I think the second piece of advice I can give is that life is not, if you think about where you are today and the outcome you're going to get to, it looks like a straight line. If you look at any biographies or whatsoever, it just looks like a straight line. So obvious in hindsight. But I think the reality is like lines are really, if you were to draw a line, it's really a bunch of dots that make up a line. And those dots,
it's like everywhere.
yeah. Okay, maybe this is not a good line, right? It's all over the place. So I think more importantly is like, you don't know when you draw these dots or these dots in your life, right? Like you don't know whether it all makes sense or not. And I think the key question is, it's okay not to know. The key point is it's okay not to know. As long as each step is moving you in the right direction, even if it's not 100% the right direction, doesn't matter. I think it's progress. And I think as long as you can keep up the momentum and progress, I think that's fine. So maybe I'll just close off with that. And last but not least, to all the aspiring like entrepreneurs out there, maybe one thing I like to share is like, so as a returning Malaysian, I've been away for the last 15 years. This is my first year in Malaysia as an adult, unfortunately. In my experience, like beyond, like I guess in other countries, Malaysians have been the best people I worked with, like from a talent perspective. So I think like one of the things I'm very, very keen on pushing and nurturing, I think coming back is like, from a raw talent perspective, adaptability, like ability to just like get over stuff, right? I think Malaysians are one of the best people out there. there is a lot of opportunity out there. I think the one piece of advice I would give to everybody from an entrepreneurial perspective is like, everybody says that Malaysia is a small market, which is, I guess, true when it compared to Indonesia and Vietnam, not so much to Singapore. So think beyond that. Like, how do you break that barrier? Like, you don't have to be constricted or constrained. So if you can apply all the abilities that you have to, I guess, a world or environment without constraint, what does that look like? How do you 10x or 100x that number or like that objective and that goal? I have no doubt that like that will lead to tremendous outcomes.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll pass over to Lord. Sorry, pass
All
over.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Juliana. All right, so the rest of you who are still with us right now, I'd like you to type in the chat box a big round of applause. You can put clap, clap, clap. To thank our panelists here for a wonderful, wonderful panel discussion. Also, thank you to every one of you, really, for giving us an insight about how to go about this. It's a fresh perspective on something that seems rather daunting, I'm sure, to most of us. So thank you so much, Juliana, Kayan, Ben, YC, and Kanya. Thank you so much for being here, being part of the e-commerce fest 2021. You stay safe now, and I'll see you guys real soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Exabytes. Grow your business online.